Auschwitz is best known as a place of death, a hellish extermination camp, the largest of its kind, where at least 1.1 million people are thought to have been murdered. So it's strange to think of the camp as a place of life as well. Stanislawa Leszczynska was instructed to murder babies, but she refused. She's a candidate for sainthood in the Catholic Church. Keep watching this video to find out more about the lady who delivered 3,000 babies in Auschwitz. Auschwitz death camps. The largest concentration camp of its type, Auschwitz is known for being a site of torment. There are estimates that at least 1.1 million people died. It's strange to think of the camp as a place where people dwell as a result. The sheer number of expectant mothers who battled to make ends meet in that filth during World War II is astounding. 6 million Jews were exterminated as part of the Nazis' final solution to the Jewish problem in continental Europe, which included unspeakable crimes against humanity. The Nazis claimed that killing more than 1.5 million children would stop subsequent generations from growing up and seeking revenge. Women who were carrying children and could hide their pregnancies went straight to the gas chambers. In the event that their pregnancies were found out, the infants were either drowned or given fatal injections to induce stillbirths. Women had to suffocate the unborn children or get a secret abortion in order to escape being executed. To safeguard everyone concerned in the mother's efforts to save her son's life, this was done. It is unknown how many Jewish newborns were murdered in the concentration camps, although the number must have been significant given the number of female prisoners. When hundreds of non-Jewish women were released at the conclusion of the war, the entire scope of this atrocity became apparent. In contrast, a relatively limited number of Jewish women and their young children were freed. A saint in Poland.
It was hard to look at them. I saw the joy in their eyes. They realized that they were free.
When the Nazis marched in Poland in 1939, everything changed. Leszczynska found herself in an occupied country, and her city, which had the second highest population of Jews in Poland, became the site of a ghetto. More than a third of the city's population was compelled to work for the Nazis in a small region. Leszczynska and her family, including her 4 children, were horrified by the conditions of the ghetto and resolved to help. When World War II started out, the Leszczynski family was active in the underground. Once the family secret was discovered in February 1943, the Gestapo swooped on their apartment, sending Leszczynska and her daughter to Auschwitz, and her 2 sons to the Mauthausen concentration camp complex in Upper Austria. Her husband managed to flee the Gestapo. Her husband kept fighting the Nazis, only to die as an insurgent during the Warsaw Uprising of 1944. She never saw him again. Ultimately, Leszczynska was separated from her sons, who were sent to different camps to do forced labor after initially escaping. She was sent to Auschwitz with her daughter, a medical student. When she arrived at the camp in April 1943, she had her midwife papers in a bag, but an SS guard threw them to the ground, saying that she wouldn't need them anymore. When he turned away, she secretly picked up the crumpled document and hid it in her camp uniform. New mothers could either choose themselves or the child. New mothers traded their paltry rations to get basic necessities for their babies. When the time for delivery was close, expectant mothers had to give up their meager bread rations so that they could get a sheet that would be used to make diapers and clothing for the child. According to a 2005 article published in the Seattle Catholic, an outlet for Catholic news and opinions. The experience was terrifying and dehumanizing, but also the most extraordinary, Leszczynska described in her report, because the mothers were still able to enjoy fleeting moments of happiness. For as long as the mother had her baby with her, the very fact of maternity itself was a ray of hope for her, Leszczynska wrote, but parting with the baby was terrible. In addition to delivering babies, Leszczynska is also remembered for standing up to Dr. Joseph Mengele, who performed horrifying experiments on prisoners that included removing organs from living subjects without anesthesia. Mengele had also instructed all newborns to be murdered, but Leszczynska refused. Mengele sentenced newborns and children to death because he saw no other option. Even though helping Jewish people was what sent her to Auschwitz in the first place, Leszczynska continued her noble and dangerous work. The fate of pregnant women. When she arrived at the camp, Leszczynska found a German doctor and told him she was a midwife. He assigned her to work in the camp's maternity ward, a set of filthy barracks that was less a place to care for pregnant women than a place to usher them into death. Most pregnant women at Auschwitz were simply sent to the gas chambers. Women who found out that they were pregnant at the camp were sometimes given abortions by Gisela Pearl, a doctor who helped prevent hundreds of women from giving birth. Often, when women were discovered to be pregnant, they were summarily executed. Others were sent to a hospital barracks to wait out the rest of their pregnancy in squalid conditions. Sister Clara, a midwife who had been sent to the camp for murdering a child, oversaw the barracks with a woman named Sister Fanny. They were in charge of declaring babies born in the ward stillborn, then drowning them in buckets, often in front of the mothers who had just given birth. Sister Clara's role did not include assisting with deliveries. When Lysenska heard what was expected of her in the macabre maternity ward, she refused. When she was taken to the doctor who oversaw the entire camp, she refused again. Why did they not kill her then? No one knows, said Lysenska's son, Bronislaw, in 1988. Despite threats and beatings by Clara, Lysenska simply began caring for mothers and delivering their babies. Despite knowing that most babies she delivered would be killed within a few hours, she worked to save as many of the mothers' lives as she could. It was almost impossible work. No running water, few blankets, no diapers, little food. Lysenska quickly learned to have women in labor lie on the rarely lit brick stove in the center of the barracks, the only place that could accommodate a laboring woman. Lice and disease were common in the hospital, which would fill with inches of water when it rained. Lysenska, assisted by her daughter and other prisoners, later said she delivered 3,000 babies during her 2 years at Auschwitz. She continued to refuse to kill babies despite repeated orders to do so, even standing up to Dr. Joseph Mengele, the camp's infamous angel of death, who was known for his brutal experiments on twins and other inmates. Not every baby was immediately murdered. Beginning in 1943, some were taken to give to Nazi couples as Aryan babies under Nazi Germany's Lebensborn program, which kidnapped up to 100,000 babies in Poland alone. Lysenska and her assistants did their best to tattoo the babies who were taken, in the hopes they would later be identified and returned with their mothers. Other women killed their babies themselves rather than hand them over to the Nazis. Non-Jewish women only had it slightly better.
There's proof from those people what went on. There's no lies. They were killing people like nothing.
Some non-Jewish women were allowed to keep their babies, but they usually perished quickly due to the conditions of the camp. However, a few Jewish babies were allowed to live, though it's unclear what happened to them. In the words of historian Zoe Waxman, if a child was allowed to survive, it was likely to be for a specific purpose and for a specific time. Lysenska felt helpless as she watched the babies she delivered be murdered or starved to death, their mothers forbidden to breastfeed. But she kept on working, baptizing Christian babies and caring as best as she could for the women in the barracks. They nicknamed her Mother. Of the 3,000 babies delivered by Lysenska, medical historians Susan Benedict and Linda Shields write that half of them were drowned, another 1,000 died quickly of starvation or cold, 500 were sent to other families, and 30 survived the camp. It's believed that all the mothers and all the newborns survived childbirth. In early 1945, the Nazis forced most inmates in Auschwitz to leave the camp on a death march to other camps. Lysenska refused to depart and stayed in the camp until its liberation. The legacy of kindness. Lysenska's legacy lived on long after the liberation of Auschwitz, both in the memories of the survivors whose baby she attempted to give a dignified birth, the lives of the few children who left the camp alive, and the work of her own children, all of whom survived the war and became physicians themselves. To this day, I do not know at what price she delivered my baby, said Maria Salomon, whose baby Lysenska delivered in the 1980s. My Liz owes her life to Stanislawa Lysenska. I cannot think of her without tears coming to my eyes. Lysenska returned to life as a midwife in Lodz after the war and only began to discuss her time at Auschwitz when she retired in 1957. This was when she first wrote of how she delivered 3,000 babies during her 2 years at the camp in a 1957 paper submitted to a midwives event in Lodz. There were no complications related to childbirth for any of the mothers or babies Lysenska attended to, according to her account. With that, we come to the end of our video. The Memorial and Museum Auschwitz-Birkenau in Poland estimates that at least 700 children were born at the camp where Lysenska served. She's still revered in Poland and has been nominated for sainthood in the Catholic Church. But even if she never becomes an official saint, her crucial work in a living hell speaks for itself.
I'm here to tell the world it happened.